Have mercy. Please, I'll bear you strong children, begged the captured alien woman. Outpost Vectra 9 lay under a bruised sky, its segmented domes crouched like steel husks across the sterilized plains. Wind curled low through the crop rows, programmed gusts regulated by the TerraWind dispersal system, but even those carried an edge of dust. Nothing truly wild was allowed here. Willie adjusted the collar of his filtration mask and checked his scanner again. The irrigation perimeter flickered orange. Movement detected. Probably another malfunctioning beetle drone. Or maybe a laborer trying to stretch their sleep cycle. Either way, it was his problem. Field Inspector. The title sounded more important than it felt. He was a glorified monitor of uterine compliance, tag and track authority on unauthorized breeding across non-human sectors. But lately, even that had begun to feel abstract. Numbers, logs, names that never looked back at you. He crossed the crop line and swept his wrist lamp along the furrows. Something shifted near the boundary fence. Low, fast, almost like a wounded animal. He stilled. The beam caught motion again, a flash of movement near the drainage shaft. A figure crouched, then running. He moved without thinking. Boots thudding on compacted soil, scanner bouncing at his hip, Willie closed the gap in seconds. The figure stumbled. He lunged, one hand catching a narrow wrist. Thin. Bone under skin. The other hand clamped a restraint around her ankle. She crumpled. Not like someone caught, more like someone who'd already given up. Her breathing was ragged, shallow. Skin, deep violet with a faint dusting of silver across her shoulders. Hair, black, tangled, trailing down her spine like wet silk. She didn't scream. She didn't plead. She just trembled. Virulent. Female. No visible tracker. Willie's scanner confirmed it. No ID. No fertility band. No work assignment. She was invisible. He crouched, steadying his grip, and turned her face gently toward the light. Her eyes blinked slowly, lids heavy with exhaustion. They were the color of dying embers, dark, with a flicker of something behind them. Not defiance. Not yet. Just fear that had learned to keep quiet. You're not tagged, he said. She swallowed hard. The skin of her throat moved with effort. His voice came out low. You know what that means. She nodded once, almost imperceptibly. Then, slowly as if rehearsed in dreams, she pushed herself to her knees. Her hands stayed loose at her sides. No struggle. Only the sound of wind scraping across the dome behind them and the soft clink of her restraint chain shifting. I'm not pregnant, she whispered, her accent light but clear. Not chipped. Not assigned. Willie stared at her. His hand didn't move. The restraint blinked quietly on her ankle. Protocol dictated immediate reporting. Instead he asked, escaping? Silence. Then her eyes met his, just for a second. And something broke open. Please, she said, voice hoarse and trembling. Don't send me back. I'll work. I'll stay quiet. I will bear you strong children. Just, don't turn me in. He blinked. The words hit harder than they should have. A practice script, clearly, ingrained, not improvised. But it wasn't the plea that twisted something in his chest. It was the way she said it. Like she didn't believe it would work, but had nothing left else to offer. Her voice didn't rise. Her lip didn't tremble. That kind of fear had been boiled down into muscle memory. Willie's hand hovered over the scanner. Above them, a patrol drone whirred past in a slow arc, its green lens eye scanning methodically. Too far to pick up biometric nuance, but close enough to log location timestamps. He stepped in front of her, blocking the line of sight. You need to move. Now. She hesitated. He grabbed her arm, not rough but firm, and pulled her to her feet. She wobbled once but didn't fall. Her weight was shockingly light. Where are you taking me? She asked softly. Someplace the cameras don't look. They moved quickly. The corridor to the detainment wing was dim and narrow, shielded from central command feeds, mostly used for internal transfers and equipment storage. A flick of his wrist pad sent a spoofed log to Central. Unit seized for misbehavior, pending reassignment. No name. No image. Inside the module, the air was dry and recycled. A single cot, a basin, one folded thermal blanket. No cameras. No comms. He let go of her arm and tapped in the override code. The ankle restraint blinked twice and released. Sit, he said. She did. Slowly. Carefully. The blanket crumpled under her hands, and she looked at it as if it might vanish. Then she pulled it close, not for comfort. For permission. Willie crossed to the storage locker and retrieved a water pouch. He knelt and offered it without a word. She took it with both hands. They shook. Not from fear anymore. Just weakness. Drink slowly, he said. She obeyed. After the first sip, she coughed, a dry hitch in her chest, and then took another. He watched her in silence. This was wrong. He knew that. Every protocol in the enforcement charter screamed violation. Yet his hands didn't shake. His pulse didn't race. If anything, there was a strange, terrible calm inside him. He sat down on the floor across from her. She had pulled the blanket up over her knees. Her eyes were half-lidded, head resting against the bulkhead, breath starting to slow. "You're lucky I was the one who found you," he said, more to himself than to her. Her eyes flicked open. "I don't feel lucky," she said softly. He couldn't argue. A moment passed. Then another. He stood. "You'll stay here. I've logged you as confiscated equipment. If anyone finds you, I'll be court-martialed and you'll be terminated. Don't speak. Don't leave. Don't trust anyone else." She nodded. No protest. No thanks. Just a tiny gesture of understanding. As he turned toward the door, she spoke again, quieter than before. "You don't even know my name." He paused, hand hovering over the panel. "I don't need to," he replied. But even as he said it, he realized how false it sounded. He left before he could second-guess himself. Back in his quarters, he stripped off his inspection coat and sat heavily at the edge of the bed. Outside the window, the artificial moonlight gleamed across the rooftops of the labor zones. Uniform lights. Uniform lives. He stared at the monitor screen across the room. No feed, he'd disabled it. No log of her. No proof. Still, her voice echoed in his head. "I will bear you strong children." He knew what that meant. Not fertility alone. Strength. Utility. A legacy of submission encoded into law. The Virulins had once governed half a sector before surrendering during the terraform concessions. Now they were seed stock. Genetic resources with a pulse. He leaned forward, elbows on knees, hands clenched together. This wasn't about her. Not really. It was about the world he'd helped keep in balance. The same rules that taught women like her to bargain with their bodies. And for the first time in a very long while, Willie couldn't tell whether he still believed in that balance. Somewhere behind the locked door, a purple-skinned woman slept, wrapped in silence, not safety. He wasn't a hero. He wasn't sure he was even a good man. But tonight, he had broken a rule and hadn't flinched. That terrified him more than anything else. The lights inside the detainment module adjusted themselves automatically to simulate morning. It was a soft white, diffused from the corners of the ceiling like artificial dawn, but it didn't feel like a new day. Willie stood just outside the door, hand hovering over the access pad. He had barely slept. His cot had gone untouched. Instead, he'd spent the night with one eye on the system logs, checking and rechecking the forged requisition he'd entered, an untagged virulin listed as confiscated genetic material pending reassignment. No alerts yet. No queries. Still, he kept imagining a blinking red light, a knock at his door, the heavy silence before everything collapsed. The system didn't miss much. But for now it hadn't noticed her. He keyed in the override and stepped inside. She was curled in the cot, knees tucked close, the thermal blanket wrapped tightly around her shoulders. Her eyes were already open. She hadn't been sleeping. Just lying still, maybe pretending. Watching the door. Her face was expressionless, but her fingers were clenched tight around the edge of the blanket, knuckles pale against violet skin. Willie entered without a word. He carried a ration tray and a sealed water pack. He set them down on the fold-out shelf beside the cot, along with a folded sanitation cloth. "You need to eat," he said. She didn't move. Her eyes flicked to the tray, then back to him. "It's not poisoned," he added quietly. "Standard field rations. Tastes like rubber, but it'll keep you standing." She sat up slowly, her blanket dragging with her. When she reached for the tray, her hands were shaking. She tried to grip the spoon, but after one trembling attempt, she gave up and lifted the dish directly to her mouth. Her shoulders stiffened. She ate fast, too fast. Willie stepped closer instinctively, then stopped himself. It wasn't a hunger he recognized. It wasn't just survival. It was desperation. She choked slightly, coughing into her sleeve. "Careful," he said, keeping his voice calm. "No one's taking it from you." She didn't look at him. Just kept eating. Slower now, but no less tense. When the tray was empty, she set it down carefully. Her eyes stayed on her lap. She didn't thank him. She didn't speak. He didn't expect her to. You're not just untagged, he said finally. You're running. She froze. I've seen undocumented laborers, he went on. Most of them get dumped in processing errors. But they don't run. They don't look at food like it might vanish. They don't flinch when someone stands too close. Her voice when it came was small. You're going to report me? If I was going to, I'd have done it already. She looked up. Not with hope. With disbelief. Why not? He sat down across from her, elbows on his knees. For a while he didn't answer. I don't know, he said at last. Maybe I wanted to see who you were before I decided. I told you, she said, more bitter now. I'm a body. A womb. That's all you need to know. No, he said. That's what someone told you to believe. Silence hung between them. You said something last night, he continued, about bearing strong children. She didn't respond, but her jaw tensed. That line, it's something you were taught to offer, isn't it? Not something you chose. She closed her eyes for a moment, then opened them again. In the virulent labor districts, she said, her voice flat, we're taught that if you're ever caught without a tag, you offer to breed. It's the only way you might be spared sterilization. Or death. Willie leaned back, staring at the wall for a long moment. There's no official policy that says. Of course not, she cut in. But that's how the system works. No one needs to write it down. He didn't argue. Because she was right. She stood then, the blanket still wrapped around her like armor. She took 2 steps toward the sanitation unit, then paused. Why are you really helping me? She asked. Not the words you think sound good. The truth. He met her gaze. He didn't look away. Because I designed this system, he said. Not all of it, but parts. I wrote efficiency models. Proposed population caps. Standardized enforcement templates. All clean on paper. He exhaled slowly. Then I came here and saw what clean really looks like. She stared at him. And for the first time she blinked, not out of fear or calculation. Just confusion. He reached into the storage locker and handed her a hygiene kit. You can shower. You should. She took it hesitantly. There's no camera, he said. I checked twice. Still holding the kit, she asked. And after that? You stay quiet, he said. You stay invisible. And I keep lying to a system that doesn't even know your name. She turned and disappeared behind the curtain. Willie stood in the silence that followed, listening to the sound of water begin to run. Not the heavy industrial spray of communal showers. This was gentler. A 2-minute cycle of warmth, just enough to wash off the outer layer of desperation. Behind the curtain, Aurenia stood under the narrow stream of recycled water. She didn't scrub. She just stood there, eyes closed, as it ran down her arms and pooled at her feet. Her hands lifted slowly to her hair, combing it back, smoothing what she could. When she emerged, the blanket was draped loosely over one shoulder, and her skin looked slightly less gray, slightly less brittle. Her eyes met his again. Not flinching this time. Just tired. Thank you, she said. He nodded. She crossed back to the cot and sat. Quietly. As if reclaiming a corner of space that might be hers. He watched her for a long moment. You're not nothing, he said. Not to me. She didn't answer. But the silence that followed no longer felt like a wall. It felt like waiting. That night, when Willie returned to his quarters, he left the light on. He didn't watch the surveillance feed. He didn't need to. She was there. Still breathing. Still real. And so was the choice he'd made. Aurenia. Not a tag. Not a code. A name. And he wouldn't forget it. The third morning passed in a silence that neither of them dared to break. Willie set the tray down on the shelf as he had the last 2 days, water, heat-pressed rations, and a second sanitation cloth. He didn't hover. Didn't speak. Just left it there like a ritual offering and returned to the chair near the doorway, where he always sat facing the window. He didn't watch her eat, but he heard the quiet clink of the dish, the soft rustle of the blanket shifting over skin. She no longer rushed. No longer shook. But she never asked for anything either. Never thanked him. And he never asked why. They were still circling the edge of something unspoken, and both of them knew it. Beyond the thick panel of composite glass, the artificial weather system had begun its midday cycle. Skies deepened from cloudless white to tinted blue, a simulated clear day to keep the laborers focused. Rows of genetically engineered crops shifted in perfect symmetry under the directional wind. It looked peaceful, efficient, controlled. Willie hated it. Behind him, the water unit hummed to life. Arena was washing her hands, another quiet routine. She'd begun to use the sanitation cloths more precisely, folding them along clean lines, wiping without waste. A small habit, but it told him she'd once had structure. Maybe even pride. She stepped into his peripheral vision but didn't approach. Instead, she moved toward the window. Slowly. Not cautiously, deliberately. She stopped a meter away from it, her arms crossed, the blanket still wrapped around her shoulders. Her skin had recovered some of its sheen. Her posture no longer sagged with fear. She stood straight now. Still thin, still tired, but not defeated. I didn't think I'd ever see Sky again, she said quietly. Willie looked over at her. That's not the real Sky, he replied. Just programming. A behavioral stimulant. She nodded. Still feels warmer than concrete walls. There was no accusation in her voice. Just truth. He hesitated. Where were you before this? She didn't answer right away. Her eyes remained on the fields. A place called Kestra Ward. Sector 14 Breeding District. Underground. No windows. Willie blinked. That far out? He knew the name. Kestra was one of the first virulent population zones where parental separation and sterilization quotas had been implemented. A pilot program. One he'd reviewed data from. Efficiency metrics. Projected outcomes. He'd never seen it. Only processed the numbers. She went on, voice calm but distant. I was tagged for priority fertility after my second cycle. They measured bone width, organ elasticity, hormone resistance. They said I was viable. The others weren't. She paused, then added, we buried them in the nutrient beds. Willie's jaw tightened. I escaped through a waste pipe. Crawled until my skin tore. I didn't know where I was going, just that I was going away. He stood and stepped toward the window, keeping a respectful distance. You're lucky you didn't die out there, he said. No, she said, looking at him now. I didn't die. But I didn't live either. Until you. He froze. Those weren't dramatic words. She hadn't whispered them for effect. She said them the same way she talked about the nutrient beds or the fake sky. Simply. As truth. He wanted to ask why that mattered. Why he mattered. But he didn't. Instead he said, you should sit. You've been on your feet too long. I'm fine, she said, but her body disagreed. She winced and instinctively placed a hand against her side. You're bruised, he observed. Still sore from the crawl? She nodded. Ribs. And my knee. He moved to the utility cabinet, pulled out the medkit and returned with a scanner and a patch strip. Sit, he said again, more firmly this time. She obeyed, folding onto the cot. Her fingers stayed gripping the blanket, but she didn't resist when he knelt beside her. Willie worked in silence. The scan showed tissue bruising but no internal damage. He applied a numbing patch over her side, then glanced up. I'll need to check your knee, he said. She hesitated, then unwrapped part of the blanket to show the swollen joint. Darkened skin, likely from impact and strain. He adjusted the patch's thermal setting and gently pressed it into place. She winced, then relaxed as the warmth spread. You're good at this, she said. Inspections come with basic medical clearance, he replied. They teach you enough to keep your assets alive. The words came out too sharply. He didn't mean to sound bitter, but it was true and they both knew it. She looked down at him. Do you hate them? He glanced up. Who? The system. The ones who built it. Willie was quiet for a long time. I used to believe it made sense. That regulation was necessary. That we were saving you from yourselves, starvation, overpopulation, resource collapse. I helped draft policies to optimize genetic output. I made arguments. Wrote reports. And now I know exactly what those reports turned into. She didn't say anything. But her fingers brushed against his wrist as he removed the patch. Not a grab. Just a brief touch, intentional. Not for balance. Not by mistake. He looked at her. She looked back. In her eyes he saw something he hadn't expected. Not trust. Not yet. But the beginning of belief. He sat beside her, saying nothing. Just sitting. The silence between them was no longer empty. Outside, the programmed clouds drifted gently across the artificial sky. Perfect. Harmless. Designed to keep everyone calm. But inside that room, something real was taking shape. And it didn't answer to any system. Not anymore. Willie was awake long before the lights shifted into morning mode. The soft amber glow edging through the ceiling panels hadn't yet activated. But his body knew, habit carved into muscle memory by years of early audits and quiet guilt. His back ached from the floor, and his right hand had gone numb from resting beneath his neck, but he didn't move. Across the room the silence was different. Not alert. Not fearful. Just still. Aurenia lay curled in the cot, wrapped in the thermal blanket up to her shoulders. One of her arms hung loosely over the side, fingers gently brushing the metal frame. Her breathing was even. Not the kind of forced stillness he'd seen from refugees pretending to sleep, but the steady, natural rhythm of real rest. She hadn't stirred once through the night. He couldn't stop watching her. Part of him felt like an intruder, like even witnessing this fragile piece without permission was a violation. But he also couldn't look away, because something had shifted. Not in her, or the room, or the system that had built the cage they both lived inside. In him. He wasn't afraid anymore. He was tired of being afraid. She stirred. Barely a twitch, then a deeper inhale. Her head shifted on the thin cot pillow. The blanket slipped slightly, revealing the curve of her shoulder. Purple skin dulled to lavender under the dim light. Willie stood and crossed to the corner utility panel, turning the heat level up 2 degrees. No announcement. Just a quiet hum as the recycled air adjusted. When he turned back, she was awake. Her eyes, still heavy with sleep, found his across the room. She blinked, then sat up slowly, rubbing the heel of her hand over her cheek. "Did you sleep?" she asked. He hesitated, then shrugged. "Some." She looked down. "You shouldn't have taken the floor. It's not the first time." Her eyes flicked to his, something unreadable tightening there. "You used to give up comfort for the system," she said. "Now you do it for me." "I don't think it's sacrifice," he said, stepping closer. "Not anymore." He lowered himself beside the cot, resting on his side, back against the wall, facing her. There was a long moment of silence. She looked at him the way someone looks at an animal they want to trust. Slowly, carefully, not with fear but with a memory of fear. "I used to lie like that," she murmured, voice soft. "Curled in tight. Trying to make my body smaller. If I looked invisible, they might pass by my pod without calling my name." Willie didn't interrupt. "My first bonding unit," she went on, "was assigned when I was 15. I was supposed to produce within the cycle." He was older. Smiled too much. "They said I should feel honored." Her fingers had curled into the blanket, not in anger, but control. She was choosing to tell this. Choosing to give it shape. "He didn't hurt me," she said. "But I didn't say yes either. And that's when I stopped thinking of my body as mine." Willie's jaw tightened. He wanted to reach for her, but he stayed still. Not offering comfort, offering presence. Aurenia looked at him. "I don't want this to be another transaction," she whispered. "I don't want warmth because I'm useful. Or safe because I'm silent." "You're not," he said. His voice cracked slightly. "You're safe because I see you." She watched him for a long breath. "Then lie here," she said. He blinked. "Just lie here," she repeated. "Next to me. Not to prove anything. Not to take. Just to be." He rose slowly, cautious of the moment, like stepping through glass. The cot was narrow, meant for one. But she shifted, making space. He lowered himself beside her, careful to keep a respectful distance. The air between them was warm now and alive with something that felt holy. Her hand found his. Neither of them looked away. "I haven't shared a bed since before I was taken," she said. "Even when I had to submit afterward, I slept alone." "You can sleep now," he said. "And wake when you choose." She didn't reply. But her thumb brushed lightly against his wrist. Willie lay still. He didn't move toward her. He didn't need to. Eventually, her head dipped forward, resting lightly against his chest. Not possession. Not fear. Just gravity. Trust given, not earned by trade. He closed his eyes, and for the first time in years he felt no urge to run. Not from the system. Not from her. Not from himself. In the warm silence of a locked room, beside a woman who once believed her worth was counted in offspring and silence, he found something he never expected. Peace. And in that peace they both slept. Side by side. Unbranded. Untouched by law. Held by nothing but choice. It was late. The artificial dusk had long since dimmed across Outpost Vector 9, and the corridors were in audit lockdown, silent, amberlit, watched. Inside the detainment module, the air was warm, the silence between them heavier than usual. Willie sat at the console, fingers resting on the screen but unmoving. The last entry blinked on the interface. A falsified requisition record, crafted with surgical precision. Orinia, biogenetic specimen recovered during unauthorized field search. Under quarantine. Awaiting transfer. Not a lie. Not the truth either. Across the room, Orinia leaned against the wall, arms crossed loosely over her chest. She'd been quiet since dinner. Not withdrawn, just still. Observing him with that unreadable look she wore when she didn't want to interrupt but couldn't pretend not to care. He finally spoke. I submitted the first segment. The identity chains masked. Should be enough to trigger access to a quarantine vessel. I'll ride as escort. No one will check twice if the system says I'm certified. Orinia's voice was calm. And when we leave? We disappear. He turned toward her. Quietly. Cling. They'll think we're on a deep rim study route. By the time they realize it's blank space, we'll be long gone. She nodded, but didn't smile. Orinia? She pushed off the wall, stepped forward, barefoot on cold metal. You talk like it's already over. Like you've already saved me. I'm trying to. I don't want to be saved. He blinked. I want to be seen. He rose slowly. I see you. Then why do you flinch when I touch you? He froze. She stepped closer. Why do you wake before me and leave the cot like you didn't belong there? His voice dropped. Because I don't. She looked at him, eyes sharp but not cruel. You think protecting me is enough? That if you do everything right, rewrite every log, file every lie, you'll be forgiven for building this place? He didn't respond. She was too close to wrong. Or too painfully right. She went on, quieter now. But I don't need you to be sorry. I need you to stop hiding behind redemption. I'm not, he said. I don't know how to want something that isn't survival. A beat of silence passed. Her voice softened, cracked. I do. He looked at her, really looked. The tremor in her fingers. The hope she was trying to crush before it crushed her. The raw, unspoken ache between them, thick as gravity. You kissed me in your sleep last night, she whispered. Light. Barely there. I didn't say anything. I was afraid if I did, you'd take it back. His breath caught. I wasn't dreaming, he said. She swallowed. Then his hands reached for her, slowly, deliberately. No force. No urgency. Just two palms finding her cheeks, brushing her hair back, thumbs resting just below her eyes. I didn't take it back, he said. I've been holding it like a breath I was too scared to release. Orinia didn't answer. She leaned in. Their lips met, not with desperation but with something deeper. A claiming without conquest. A welcome without permission. A silence finally allowed to speak. Her hands gripped his shirt. His fingers threaded into her hair. The kiss deepened, not frantic but real, anchored by everything they had survived and everything they had refused to become. When they broke apart, they didn't move. Foreheads pressed, breath shared, eyes closed. I don't want a future where I'm hidden, she said. You won't be, he replied. Not ever again. I want to sleep beside someone who chooses me. Not because they feel guilty. Not because they want to fix me. He cupped her face steady. Then choose me too. Not for escape. Not for safety. For this. I already did. She didn't need to say the rest. They lay down together on the cot, the same narrow space they had shared in silence before, but now the air around them was different. Warm with the permission of truth. They didn't undress. Didn't press further. The closeness was enough. A body wrapped around another, not as shield, not as transaction, but as something quietly holy. They drifted into sleep wrapped in a single thought neither of them had dared believe until now. This isn't survival anymore. It was beginning. The life after. The one they chose. Together. Willie woke to the low, rhythmic hum of an incoming scan. The sound was subtle, inaudible to most, but his body had learned to recognize it long ago. It started in the base of his spine and crawled upward like an old scar set vibrating. He sat up in one movement, sheets rustling beneath him. Orinia stirred beside him, her body curling instinctively at his sudden tension. Her fingers brushed his arm. What is it? She whispered. He held up a hand. The sound clicked again, closer now. A utility pulse. External. Unauthorized. Willie moved fast, crossing the room to the terminal. His fingers danced across the controls in silence, overriding the alert system before it could chime. Station scan initiated, he muttered. Not on our schedule. She was out of bed now, standing behind him in the borrowed soft gray tunic she'd taken to wearing. Her voice was hushed but clear. They're looking. Yeah. He turned to her. There's a micro-drone sweeping the quarters level. We have 90 seconds. Aurenia didn't ask what would happen if they were caught. She already knew. Willie opened the floor hatch beneath the cot, originally installed for coolant storage, and gestured. Inside. Stay silent. Do not move. She crouched without protest, sliding into the narrow compartment. He closed the hatch with care, then scattered an old maintenance towel and a crate of unused filters over it. Nothing fancy, just clutter made to look unintentional. A sharp pulse flickered at the door. The scan had arrived. Willie stood in full uniform. He hadn't worn it in days. The collar felt tighter than he remembered. The door slid open. A junior enforcer stepped inside, gray-armored, visor reflective. One of the newer batch. Too eager. Random audit, the enforcer said flatly. Orders came through Central. Willie forced a cold smirk. If they're truly random, we should all be concerned. No offense, sir. Just doing my cycle. The enforcer moved past him without waiting, glancing over the workstation, the food trays, the extra blanket still rumpled at the edge of the cot. Willie tensed. The enforcer's helmet tilted toward the floor. Room's a mess. I've been busy. There was a pause. Then, anyone else entered these quarters in the last 7 cycles? No. Another pause. You're aware of an untagged virulent female spotted near Sector 9? Willie met the visor without blinking. I read the brief. Do I look like I'd shelter one? No, sir, the enforcer replied. But his tone had changed just slightly. More curious than compliant. Willie nodded toward the door. You've done your sweep. The enforcer hesitated. For a moment, Willie thought the kid might push. Then he turned and stepped out. Have a secure shift. The door hissed shut. Willie didn't move for a full 10 seconds. Then he dropped to the floor, cleared the cover, and reached for the hatch. It creaked open. Aurenia blinked up at him, skin damp from the enclosed heat. He offered his hand. She took it. Neither of them spoke. When she was out, she wrapped her arms around herself, not for modesty but to hold something in. He recognized the shake in her shoulders before she did. He guided her back to the bed. Still no words. Just quiet breathing, the kind that comes after adrenaline crashes and hearts recalibrate. You were calm, she said finally. Cold. I had to be. I hated it. Willie sat down beside her. So did I. She turned, eyes glassy. What would have happened if they found me? They'd send you to GenRAF processing. You'd be tested for productivity stats. Most likely sterilized. Her lips parted in shock. But I haven't. Doesn't matter. She dropped her head into her hands. He watched her helpless. Then he reached over, tentatively, slowly, and pulled her into him. She didn't resist. Her face pressed to his chest, breath shallow. His arms wrapped around her shoulders. She wasn't crying. She was too drained for that. I don't want to hide anymore, she whispered into his shirt. You won't. You said that before. And I meant it. His voice broke. But I didn't know how close we were. It's not safe here. Not even for another day. She nodded. He pulled back, looking into her eyes. We leave tonight. Her expression didn't change. Where will we go? There's an unmapped stretch near the Athanar Nebula. Cool. Sparse. But clean. It'll be off the charts. No patrols. No quotas. And no people? No one to harm you, he corrected. Just enough distance to decide what we want next. She stared at him. Then, without warning, she kissed him again. But this time there was no tremble in it. No hesitation. Just certainty. When they parted, her voice was steady. If we leave, we don't go back. Willie nodded. I burned the logs. All of them. She drew a breath. Then tonight we disappear. And for the first time since they met, it wasn't fear they shared. It was purpose. They wouldn't just survive. They would escape. Together. The stars outside the viewport weren't just distant. They were undisturbed. No comms ping. No surveillance pings. No reflected heat trails from patrol ships. Only the quiet hum of the Triskelions' drive core as it glided beyond the last charted sector of human-controlled space. Willie leaned forward in the pilot's chair, one hand on the navigation control, the other loosely gripping the edge of the console. The blue of the Athanar Nebula glowed faintly off his jawline. Behind him, the ship's internal lights dimmed to rest mode, casting everything in soft twilight. Aurenia emerged from the narrow corridor barefoot, dressed in the clean, sand-gray garments they'd salvaged from the ship's supply cache. Her dark hair was braided now, sleek and functional, but it couldn't hide the way her violet eyes were quietly scanning the stars. She stopped beside him, placing a single hand on the headrest. "No alarms," she said softly. "No ghosts either," he replied. She tilted her head. "You sound disappointed." He allowed himself a quiet smile. "I think I just don't know what peace feels like anymore." She sat beside him in the co-pilot's seat, tucking her knees up beneath her. Her bare toes touched the edge of the console, delicately, like she still didn't believe it was hers to touch. "How far are we from Vector 9 now?" she asked. 3 jumps. And about 12 light years of shame. She reached for his hand. He let her take it. "You don't have to carry that anymore," she said. He stared at the stars. "I do," he answered. "But not alone." They sat in silence for a while. It was the kind of silence that no longer frightened her. The kind that had meaning instead of emptiness. Eventually she turned to him. "There's something I want to show you." Willie raised a brow. She uncurled from the chair and crossed the room to the sealed cargo bay. When she returned, she was carrying a small case, metal, unmarked, no visible lock. She placed it on the table between them and opened it. Inside were 3 braided bands, dark silver cords wrapped around deep violet threads. Each one was thin, elegant, unmistakably hand-woven. He blinked. "What are they?" "Virulent pledge bands," she said. "From before the camps. Before the quotas. We used to exchange them during union rights, not for marriage exactly but for loyalty. It meant we would live, raise, protect, together." Willie didn't speak. "I didn't bring many things when I escaped," she said. "But I brought these." He lifted one. It was cool to the touch, heavier than it looked. The woven strands were intricate, almost like circuitry, but soft where his thumb brushed it. "I thought," she began, then hesitated, "if we're going to be free, I want to start from something that was mine." Willie looked up. Her eyes didn't plead. They never begged, not anymore. But they shone with something else, something that made his throat tighten. "This isn't a ritual I deserve," he said. "Not after what I was." She reached across and looped the band gently around his wrist. "You stopped being what you were the moment you chose to help me." Her hand stayed on his arm. "And I stopped being afraid the moment you gave me a name again." He stood, walked over to her, and slowly took one of the other bands. With trembling fingers he tied it around her wrist, matching the knot she'd made on his. "I don't know what kind of life we'll have," he said quietly. "But I know I'll protect it with everything I am." She leaned her forehead against his. "Then that's enough." Outside, the nebula pulsed, a slow, luminous heartbeat. They watched it for a long time, side by side. No longer fugitives. No longer just survivors. And when Aurenia finally broke the silence, it wasn't with fear or longing. It was with a smile. "There's one more thing," she said. "I'm late." He blinked. "Late?" Her fingers settled on her lower belly. 6 cycles late. Willie stared. A heartbeat passed. "2." Then he exhaled. Shaky. Disbelieving. "Are you sure?" She nodded. "Virulent fertility isn't subtle. And neither are the dreams I've been having." He sat down hard in the chair. His hand was still in hers. "You're going to be a father?" she said. He looked at her, utterly undone. And smiled. Not the tired smirk he wore at outposts, not the bitter twist of regret from years buried in silence. A real smile. Human. Oh. Then he laughed, soft and broken. And whispered, "Have mercy." Aurenia leaned into him, voice warm in his ear. "I will. But only if you raise them strong." He kissed her again, not with fear this time, not with apology but with joy. And far beyond the human surveillance grid, past every zone marked unfit for habitation, a single unauthorized vessel sailed toward an unnamed system, bearing 2 souls who had defied everything their world demanded. Together they had not just escaped. They had built a future. The sun rose softly over the unnamed world they now called home. It wasn't much, a modest green moon orbiting a gas giant deep beyond the last known human survey grid. But it was warm, breathable, and quiet. A place that didn't ask anything of them except presence. Their shelter sat nestled against a hillside, built from salvaged plating and native stone. The solar dome above filtered the early light into pale gold, casting long, gentle rays across the bedding inside. Aurenia stirred first. She always did now. Wrapped in a pale blanket, one bare leg exposed to the breeze, she blinked slowly and turned toward the sound of breath beside her. Willie lay on his back, one hand resting near her pillow, the other curled beneath his head. He hadn't shaved in days and a shadow had settled along his jaw. But the hard lines were soft now, shaped by rest and contentment. Orinia reached out, traced a finger along his wristband, the old Virulin cord now faded, worn at the edges but unbroken. She pressed her lips to it. Then she sat up and stretched, spine arching with feline grace, her long dark hair catching the light like silk. The scent of warm earth and wild citrus drifted in from the open panel that served as their window. Outside, a grove of twisted, berry-laden trees rustled softly in the breeze. A small irrigation line burbled nearby, fed by a crude, solar-powered pump he had built by hand. Birds, not Terran but melodic, chirped in curious rhythms. She dressed slowly, simply, loose linen trousers, a halter top made from scavenged ship fabric. Then she stepped out into the sun. Willie found her an hour later, crouched barefoot near the edge of the water basin. She was humming, something wordless and ancient, while washing a small pile of vegetables she'd harvested that morning. "You know you don't have to do that by hand," he teased from the doorway. She looked up. "I know. But it tastes better this way." He walked to her, crouched beside her, and kissed her temple. "Or maybe you just like watching me try to eat with purple fingers." "That too." They shared breakfast in the sun, boiled roots, wild fruit, and warm tea made from some fragrant leaves she'd found growing by the ridge. It was simple food but real. Nourishing. And for the first time in either of their lives, eaten without urgency. Afterward, she lay on the ground, head resting on his stomach as he read from a weathered data pad, an old human novel about a soldier who didn't want to fight anymore. He didn't read well, not aloud, but she didn't mind. She liked the weight of his voice, the way he paused every now and then to frown at a word and say it again. Later, she dozed in the shade while he tended the new crop rows, watching his strong hands work the soil, shirt tied around his waist, skin kissed by the sun. He moved slower now. Not because he was older but because he no longer ran from anything. When she woke, she found him sitting on the edge of the hill, facing the horizon. His back was to her. She padded over and sank down behind him, wrapping her arms around his waist, resting her cheek between his shoulder blades. He placed a hand over hers. "I didn't think it was possible," he said. She didn't ask what he meant. She knew. He turned his head slightly, just enough for his lips to brush her forehead. "You," he said. "This place. It all feels quiet," she whispered. "Right," he finished. They sat like that for a long time. As the sun dipped lower, casting copper light across the wild grove, Orinia shifted to face him fully. "There's a pool below the ridge," she said. "Deep. Clear." He raised an eyebrow. "You want to swim?" "I want to race you." He snorted. "You'll lose." "I'm pregnant." "Not weak." He blinked, eyes softening. "Still sure?" She placed his hand on her belly. "I can feel it now. Just the smallest flutter." He looked down, awe softening every line of his face. Orinia leaned in and kissed him. Not like the first time. Not like the desperate, breathless gasps of survival. This was slower. Deeper. A kiss without fear. Without hunger. Without need. Just love. When they pulled back, she stood, tugged him to his feet. He followed her down the hill, laughing as she ran ahead, barefoot and light, hair flying like a dark banner. She dove first, a silver flash in the water. He followed. And for the first time in all the years either of them had walked under stars, no alarms rang. No voices ordered. No blood followed. Only sunlight. Only freedom. Only joy.